Get ready to step into a world steeped in terror and desolation. In the depths of the trenches of the First World War, life became a nightmare of unimaginable squalor and horror. If you're easily scared, it's better not to continue. Because what you're about to see can make your heart freeze with fear. But for those who have the courage to carry on, get ready to witness haunting and dark accounts, where the line between life and death becomes thin. And if you're fearless, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. After all, only the bravest will survive this journey through the shadows of war. In the horror of the First World War trenches, life was an endless nightmare, a labyrinth of fear and despair. The war, which swept the world from 1914 to 1918, was an unparalleled disaster, a scourge that devoured lives without mercy. Among the brutal tactics was the trench warfare, a macabre dance between advance and retreat. These deep pits, dug into the earth by trembling hands, were more than mere defenses. They were temporary graves, where the air was imbued with the scent of imminent death. The no man's land separated the world of the living from the world of the dead, where every step was a dance with destiny. The soldiers, confined in these scars on the earth, faced a relentless enemy. Not only the adversaries on the other side, but also the very earth itself, which seemed to swallow them into its bowels. Daily life was a ritual of horror, where insanity lurked in every shadow. Trench warfare was not just a strategy, but rather a continuous nightmare, a deadly trap where advancement was an empty promise and retreat was the only path to temporary salvation. Horror was palpable, terror was constant. And so, life in the trenches became a dark tale, where death was the only certainty amidst the chaos of war. In the dark depths of the trenches, soldiers faced constant torment. There, where time seemed to freeze in an eternal cycle of suffering, they lived immersed in an earthly hell. Months dragged on within these abysses, where not even the weather was merciful. Under the scorching heat of the sun or the biting cold of the snow, they fought not only against the elements, but against the horrors of combat. Relentless bombardments, howling mortars, the menacing buzz of machine guns, and the deadly specter of toxic gas were their companions in misery. Trapped in their positions, soldiers were forced to perform their basic needs on the very ground where they huddled for protection. There they also found their meager rations, stored in conditions that seemed more like an invitation to putrefaction. The fetid aroma of feces and urine permeated the air, intertwining with the putrid odor of corpses and the sickening smell of gangrenous wounds. It was a macabre spectacle, where rats, hungry and relentless, competed with soldiers for the feast of the dead. In his macabre work, a comrade recounted the hellish vision of a soldier, a silent witness to the voracity of flesh-devouring rodents. Amidst the desolate landscape of the trenches, carnage stretched out like a dark mantle. Corpses, inert victims of the massacre, adorned the ground, silent witnesses to the cruelty of war. A soldier, in his grim memories, described the macabre sight of fallen comrades, their bodies strewn like pieces of a human puzzle, under the relentless rain that washed their doomed souls. Among them, the rats, voracious hordes fed by human flesh, devoured the mortal remains, indifferent to the horror surrounding them. James, on a foggy night, faced the deepest terror when he came across one of these abandoned dead. Obese and content rats emerged from their tattered coats, their ghastly skin coated in the blood of those who became their meal. With his heart in convulsions, Jacques approached stealthily, witnessing the grotesque spectacle of the mutilated corpse. The face distorted by decay, eyes devoured by worms, a cavernous mouth from which emerged a vile and repulsive intruder. But beyond the macabre horror, trench warfare was also a battle against the body and mind. Trench foot, a cruel ailment born of penetrating moisture and cruel cold, tormented the soldiers mercilessly. Lost fingers, rotting flesh, dismembered feet inside the boots were silent witnesses to unspeakable suffering. Moving within these corridors of despair often resulted in mutilation, where the flesh itself rebelled against its host in a final cry of agony. It was as if the very earth was alive, a malevolent entity feeding on the pain and despair of men who dared to challenge its limits. At night, when darkness swallowed everything, sinister sounds echoed through the trenches, spectral whispers filling the soldiers' hearts with unspeakable terror. Sometimes, in the trembling shadows, glimpses of ghostly figures were spotted, moving silently among the corpses and wreckage of war. Anguished whispers echoed through the dark corridors, voices crying out for justice or vengeance, lost forever in the shadowy depths of death. James, on a freezing night, found himself confronted by a presence that could not be explained by human logic. A hooded figure, shrouded in dense shadows, hovered over the battlefields, its eyes gleaming like burning coals in the darkness. A cold shiver ran down James' spine as the figure approached slowly, its touch as cold as death. But it wasn't just the specters from beyond that haunted the trenches. Something sinister lurked in the depths of the earth, an ancient and hungry force that fed on men's deepest fears. As the war dragged on, strange reports emerged among the soldiers, stories of grotesque creatures crawling from the depths, thirsting for blood and fresh flesh. And so, in the dark depths of the trenches, the line between reality and nightmare grew ever crueler. Soldiers fought not only against the human enemy, but against forces beyond comprehension, trapped in an endless cycle of horror and despair. What awaited those who dared to challenge the dark depths of war? Only time could reveal. As the war raged on, reports of inexplicable incidents multiplied, feeding the terror that took root in the soldiers' minds. Sinister shadows danced in the dim light of torches, twisting into distorted forms that seemed to defy the laws of reality. Horrified witnesses described encounters with creatures that did not belong to this world, grotesque monsters that emerged from the depths of the earth to reap the souls of the living. On a fateful night, during a desperate patrol, a group of soldiers encountered something that defied all reason. A dense, oppressive fog enveloped them, obscuring their vision and causing them to lose their way. Anguished screams echoed through the trenches as dark beings emerged from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with insatiable hunger. James, paralyzed by fear, found himself confronted with a vision that threatened to corrode his sanity. Distorted figures, half men half shadows, advanced towards him, their sharp claws ready to tear his flesh apart. A shrill cry tore through the air as the battle between the soldiers and the creatures of darkness erupted, a macabre dance of life and death amidst the chaos of war. And so, the line between the world of the living and the dead vanished in the depths of the trenches, where horror reigned supreme. What awaited those who ventured beyond the boundaries of humanity? A dark and unknown fate lurked in the shadows, ready to swallow everything around it. Terror was real, palpable, a sinister presence rising from the depths of darkness. In the depths of the trenches, beyond the atrocities of conventional warfare, lurked an ancient evil, awakened by the cries of pain and despair of the soldiers. Something sinister stirred beneath the trampled earth, a presence that fed on the fear and agony of men. On a stormy night, as lightning tore through the sky in fury, a lone soldier dared to venture beyond the safety of the lines. His footsteps echoed like a macabre refrain in the oppressive darkness, while a sense of unease enveloped him, as if thousands of unseen eyes watched him from the shadows. Suddenly, a shiver ran down his spine as a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its body contorting into twisted, grotesque shapes. Incandescent eyes pierced the darkness, emitting a supernatural glow that seemed to penetrate the soldier's soul. With a scream of terror, he recoiled, but it was too late. Other monstrous forms emerged from the depths, beings whose distorted features defied all human understanding. Amidst the chaos of the supernatural battle, the soldier found himself fighting not only for his life, but for his sanity, as creatures of darkness closed in on him in a whirlwind of terror. And so, in the shadows of the trenches, war transcended the bounds of human understanding, becoming a battlefield between the world of the living and the dead. What awaited those who ventured beyond the borders of reason? Only the darkness knew the answer, patiently waiting to reveal its terrible secret. As night advanced, the horror in the trenches took on even more grotesque forms. Ancestral shadows danced around the soldiers, whispering promises of death and despair in their ears. The air was thick with a rotten odor, as if the very bowels of the earth were opening to reveal its darkest secrets. James, entangled in the labyrinth of underground tunnels, felt lost in an endless nightmare. The flickering light of his lantern barely illuminated the damp, moss-covered walls, while a sense of oppression intensified around him. A chilling whisper echoed through the narrow corridors, causing his hair to stand on end. Suddenly, a sinister presence emerged from the shadows, its eyes gleaming with supernatural light. It was a creature beyond any human description, an abomination born from the darkest nightmares. With a guttural roar, it lunged towards James, its sharp claws sparking with a promise of imminent death. A strangled cry escaped James's lips as he struggled to break free from the grip of the monstrous creature. His lungs burned with the thin air, his heart pounding in his chest like a wild drum. Amidst the chaos of battle, he found himself facing a force beyond his comprehension, an entity that did not belong to this world. And so, in the depths of the trenches, the battle for the fate of humanity took on epic proportions. Creatures of darkness emerged from the shadows, devouring unsuspecting soldiers in a frenzy of blood and terror. What awaited those who ventured into the abyss of war? Only the future could reveal. The darkness became palpable in the depths of the trenches, as if it were a shroud of shadows woven by the horrors of war. The soldiers, enveloped in this blackness, felt like prey in a spider's web, where danger lurked in every shadow, waiting for the right moment to strike. James, on a night patrol, found himself surrounded by a darkness so dense it seemed to devour his own light. His footsteps echoed like nervous sighs, while a cold shiver ran down his spine. Then, a distant sound was heard, a chilling murmur that seemed to come from all directions at once. Suddenly, ghostly figures emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted in expressions of eternal agony. They were the specters of the dead, the ghosts of soldiers who had perished in the trenches, returning to haunt the living. James tried to flee, but his legs refused to obey, rooted to the ground as if made of stone. The ghosts advanced slowly, dragging invisible chains that echoed like anguished screams. Their empty eyes gleamed with a supernatural light, illuminating the darkness around them. James felt panic seize his heart, his mind spinning in a whirlwind of terror. And so, in the bowels of the trenches, the line between the world of the living and the dead vanished, leaving only a vortex of despair and desolation. What awaited those who ventured into these dark depths? Only the shadows knew, guarding their macabre secrets in the depths of the war's infernal abyss. As night progressed, the horrors of the trenches revealed themselves in their full dark splendor. Sinister shadows writhed on the damp walls, dancing to the macabre rhythm of soldiers' agonizing sighs. A chilling wind whispered obscure secrets, echoing like a funeral lament through the twisting corridors. James, on a desperate mission, plunged into the depths of the trenches, his lantern barely illuminating the path ahead. Each step was a deeper dive into darkness, a descent into the abyss of the unknown. Then, he heard a sound, a distant murmur that seemed to emanate from the depths of the earth. A shiver ran down his spine as a shadowy figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It was a creature beyond human comprehension, an abomination born from the deepest nightmares. James felt terror grip his heart as the creature advanced, its steps echoing like the beating of wings of a black crow. With a cry of horror, Jacques tried to retreat, but his legs seemed petrified, rooted to the ground as if they were part of the earth itself. The creature advanced relentlessly, its sharp claws extended for attack. James closed his eyes, preparing for the final blow, but what happened next was even more disturbing. An explosion of light tore through the darkness, banishing the shadows and revealing the true form of the creature. It was a manifestation of James's deepest fears, a projection of his own inner demons. He was fighting against himself, trapped in an endless nightmare in the bowels of the trenches. The revelation shook James to the core of his soul, leaving him bewildered and terrified. He found himself trapped in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, battling his own demons as the creature drew near, its eyes burning with supernatural intensity. The soldier desperately tried to suppress the panic threatening to consume him, but the shadows around him seemed to twist and coil into his mind, feeding his deepest fears. He could feel the sinister presence of the creature, its rasping breath echoing in his ears like a menacing whisper. In a final act of desperation, James raised his weapon and fired at the creature, but the bullets seemed to dissolve in the air before even hitting it. The creature advanced relentlessly, each step resonating like a funeral drum, as Jacques retreated further into the abyss of madness. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the darkness, a familiar voice cutting through the tumult of James's terrifying thoughts. It was the voice of his comrade, calling out to him amidst the chaos. With a superhuman effort, James managed to break free from the grip of the shadows, jolting back to reality. But the creature was still there, staring at him with lifeless, empty eyes. And as James struggled to regain control of his senses, he knew that the battle was far from over. In the depths of the trenches, terror was a constant presence, a shadow that never completely dissipated. The creature advanced slowly, its claws extended like sharp spears ready to pierce James's body. He felt his heart pounding uncontrollably in his chest, while his legs trembled with terror. Each step of the creature seemed to echo like a war drum, heralding the arrival of an epic battle between life and death. James tried to gather his strength, fighting against the paralysis threatening to overcome him. He knew he couldn't let fear dominate him, but it was difficult to resist the oppressive presence of the creature, its sinister aura enveloping him like a dark cloak. With a cry of determination, James raised his weapon once again, his fingers trembling with anticipation. He aimed at the creature, his mind a whirlwind of tumultuous thoughts. But before he could fire, something extraordinary happened. A bright light emerged from the depths of the trenches, banishing the shadows and enveloping the creature in a radiant halo. James blinked, surprised by the sudden turn of events. The creature recoiled, its distorted form quivering under the intensity of the light. But the peace was short-lived. Soon, a deafening roar echoed through the trenches, making the ground tremble beneath his feet. A new threat emerged from the shadows, even more terrible and monstrous than the previous one. James felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that the battle was far from over. As the forces of evil gathered around him, James prepared for the final confrontation. In the depths of the trenches, the fate of humanity hung by a thread, as terror and fiction intertwined in a deadly dance. What awaited those who dared to defy the darkness? Only time could tell, as the war in the trenches continued to unfold into an endless nightmare. As the battle unfolded, it became increasingly clear to James that these moments of terror and distorted visions were merely symptoms of the devastating consequences of war. The trenches, with their suffocating atmosphere and relentless violence, had unleashed a storm of anguish and hallucinations in the minds of the soldiers. As he faced the new threat looming before him, Jacques struggled to separate reality from illusion, to distinguish between what was true and what was merely a manifestation of his own despair. Every shadow seemed to conceal a new danger, every noise echoed like a distorted echo of his own anxiety. And then, in a moment of fleeting clarity, James realized the true nature of his battle. He wasn't just fighting against the forces of darkness, but against the shadows of his own mind, against the invisible scars left by war. With this newfound understanding, James confronted the imminent threat with renewed determination. He knew that the only way to overcome the horrors of the trenches was to confront his inner demons head-on, to face the past with courage and determination. As the confrontation escalated, the line between reality and imagination became increasingly blurred. But James was determined not to succumb to despair, not to be consumed by the shadows that surrounded him. For he knew that even in the depths of war, hope could still be found, a fragile and delicate light that shone even in the darkest of darkness. With one final charge, James faced the creature with courage and determination, wielding his weapon against the darkness threatening to engulf him. A glimmer of hope lit up his eyes as he fought, a spark of resistance against the evil forces surrounding him. And then, in a final act of bravery, James managed to defeat the creature, dispersing the shadows that had haunted the trenches for so long. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the ranks of soldiers as they witnessed the victory of their comrades in arms over the forces of evil. At dawn, the trenches seemed quieter, more peaceful, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. James, exhausted but triumphant, looked around, seeing his fellow soldiers emerging from the shadows to join him in victory. With a weary smile, James addressed them, his voice echoing with gratitude and determination. "We have survived once again," he said, "and we will not forget those who fell on this battlefield. May their courage and sacrifice never be forgotten." And so, with one last glance at the now silent trenches, James turned to the future, ready to face the challenges that still lay ahead. As the sun rose over the battlefield, he made a promise to himself and his fellow soldiers, that they would never forget the horrors they witnessed, but they would also never lose hope for a better tomorrow. Thus, the tale of terror and courage in the trenches of war came to an end, but the legacy of James and his fellow soldiers would live on forever. For those who enjoyed this story of terror and dark moments of war, I invite you to leave a like and subscribe to General Jack's channel, where more chilling tales await to be discovered.